invited guests, eminent scholars and academicians from around the globe, friends, well-wishers, and family of Professor Jacob John Kattakayam. We, the students of Professor Kattakayam, an Institute of Social Research and Action, proudly invites you to the first memorial lecture in the honor of Professor Jacob John Kattakayam. Professor J.J.K, an inspiring teacher, seasoned academician, ardent administrator. The list is almost unending. But beyond any quality that can be associated with his name, he was a great human being, too compassionate and trusting, who found goodness in everyone whom he met and associated with. He believed in his inner strength that made him a humanist in principle, a pallbearer of high standards, a great inspiration, capable of eliciting the best from his students. He made sure that his students flourished in their merits and accomplished as academics, and discipline at large grew in length and breadth. In short, I would say he's a beautiful combination of a visionary and a human, the divine and the human together. This small effort is the least we can, as a students, and accomplish, do to live up to his dreams and expectations and to take off from where he has left us. A word about the organizing team. Institute of Social Research and Action, an NGO based in Thiruvananthapuram, has been an initiative by Professor Kattakayam with the idea of engaging in research, training, and advocacy on any social issues that requires an expert engagement. The J.J.K Students Collective is a band of 41 students to whom he was the research supervisor. They are currently researchers and academicians around the country and abroad. On behalf of the organizing team, let me welcome one and all to the Professor J.J. Kattakayam First Memorial Lecture. Let me bring to your kind attention that we are simultaneously live streaming the entire program, the link to which is given in the chat box. The program for tonight has two sessions, to be brief. The first, the memorial lecture, and the second session would be the recollection of memories of Professor Kattakayam, rather a session filled with emotion and personal notes. The event has been honored with the presence and active participation of eminent scholars across the globe, family members of Professor Kattakayam, his wife, Advocate Gracie, daughter Jisha, and son Jibi, along with their family, are also with us today. Let me invite Dr. Anthony Palekal, Professor and Head, Department of Sociology, University of Kerala, to formally welcome the delegates.
A warm greetings to all of you who are present here for this very important function, Professor Jacob John Kattakayam First Memorial Lecture. Our most respected and beloved Professor T.K. Women, the president of this function, Advocate Anthony Raju, Honorable Minister for Transport, Government of Kerala, who is delivering the inaugural address for this function, and our most respected Professor Arjuna Padure, who delivers the memorial lecture today, and the dignitaries, eminent scholars, academicians world over, who are gathered here. A very warm welcome to one and all. In mid-December 2019, in the preface of the fifth volume that Dr. Nisha Jolie Nelson and I have edited in honor of Professor Jacob John Kattakayam, we wrote as the last sentence of the preface, as this first shift goes to print, we are struggling to accept the reality that Professor Jacob John Kattakayam our beloved teacher, mentor, and friend, is no longer with us and has returned to the divine womb of the Mother Nature to be a beacon of light to continue to guide us. When we wrote this, only a week had elapsed since Professor Kattakayam did adieu forever so very unexpectedly. But we realized sooner than later that he continues to be a source of inspiration to many who came in contact with him. This is the reason why the cohort of Professor Kattakayam's PhD scholars, a record number of 41 of us, and a legion of friends and associates instituted this memorial lecture so as to continue the legacy of a person so very ordinary and simple in his relationships and dealings with people, yet lived a life less ordinary. It's a fact that all his PhD students are what they are today is because of Professor Kattakayam's affectionate accompaniment, not only in their academic life, but also in their personal life as well. Likewise, sociology as a profession for what it is today in Kerala has the esteemed signature of Professor Kattakayam's lifelong sweat and also in the development of the professional body of sociology in India. He was, of course, a research guide, educationist, administrator, organizer, mentor, and a friend par excellence. But more than all these, what we cherish in Professor Kattakayam was that he was an academician with a humane faith. I believe that it is this cherished element of his personality of being humane that he became passionately involved in the lives of the elderly and the aged and dedicated his life for their cause and well-being. As the general convener of this first lecture in his honor and memory, I consider it a privilege to welcome this august assembly from across the globe. In fact, we have been waiting to hold this lecture on site for long, and as the pandemic is prolonged indefinitely, we were constrained to organize it online. We are extremely honored when Professor T.K. Umen, one of the doyens of Indian sociology, has graciously agreed to be the president of the first memorial lecture. As an Indian sociologist, Professor Umen has the singular credit of holding some distinguished positions, such as the chairman of the advisory committee, Gujarat Harmony Project, that explored the possibility of reconciliation between Hindus and Muslims after the 2002 communal carnage in Gujarat. Member of the Prime Minister's high-level committee to study the social, economic, and educational status of the Muslim community of India, popularly known as the Qatar Committee. Secretary General of the 11th World Congress of Sociology held in New Delhi. The President of International Sociological Association, and the only one from Asia and Africa to be in this position. Chairman of Ford Foundation on Non-Traditional Security. In addition, he also served as the President and Secretary of Indian Sociological Society, the editor of Sociological Bulletin Thrive, the official organ of the Indian Sociological Society. Professor Umen is more known among the academia and the intelligentsia for his works and discourses on Indian society, as he has several books and scholarly articles. He has carved out a niche in Indian sociology by developing a new episteme to anchor it in the Indianness, with a view to free it more and more from its colonial baggage. On behalf of the organizing team and all those who are assembled here, let me extend a most cordial welcome to you, sir, Professor Umen, to this function. And we consider it as a proud privilege and good fortune that Professor Arjun Appadurai, a leading contemporary social cultural anthropologist, is delivering the Jacob John Kattakayam First Memorial Lecture today. Professor Appadurai is the Goddard Professor in Media, Culture and Communication at New York University where he is also senior professor at the Institute for Public Knowledge. He is also the Max Weber Global Fellow at the Bard Graduate Center in New York, Fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and is a member of the UNESCO Commission on the Future of Education. Formerly, he has held prestigious positions such as the Provost and Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs at the New School in New York University, in New York City, and various professional chairs and visiting appointments at some of the top institutions in the United States and Europe. Professor Appadure is a world-renowned expert on the cultural dynamics of globalization, having authored numerous books and scholarly articles. I remember that way back in early 2000, while I was pursuing my PhD on the cultural effects of globalization on Kerala, I referred to some of the seminal works of Professor Appadure extensively. Appadure's concept of scape metaphor and its intrinsic meaning of global flows and fluidity, along with the new vistas of meaning that he assigned to the Marxian concept of fetishism of commodities, provided me the conceptual framework to explain the rampant consumer culture that had engulfed the state of Kerala then. And surprisingly, Professor Ravi Raman, a seasoned academician and presently member of the Planning Board Government of Kerala, the moment he came to know that Professor Appadure is delivering the first memorial lecture, brought to my attention a recent article that he published in Cambridge Journal of Regions, Economy and Society, where he used Professor Appadure's scape metaphor as the framework for his paper, where he introduced the notion of ecospatiality in explaining the transformations of Kerala's post-flood riskscape. Professor Appadure is one of the most Am I audible now? Okay. Yes. I don't know where I stopped. Where I was unmute. Okay. So I was trying to say that Professor Appadure is one of the most cited scholars in India in studies and research work on globalization, media, and culture. Hence, I believe that it is a most fitting homage to Professor Kattakayam that Professor Appadure, such a distinguished scholar, is delivering this memorial lecture. The very moment we contacted Professor Appadure with this request, he was so gracious and diligent in saying yes. And in all the subsequent correspondence, he was very prompt and responsive, with sentiments of deep appreciation and gratitude. In the name of all those who are present here, may I welcome Professor Appadure to this function. A warm welcome to you, Professor Appadure. Now, our Honorable Minister, Sri Anthony Raju, a lawyer by profession, is a seasoned political leader. He is a politician with a difference, who found his way to the ministerial cabinet from a coastal village of Thiruvananthapuram. It was his long-standing, intimate friendship with Professor Kattakayam and his family that prompted Honorable Minister to be part of this first memorial event, despite his busy schedule. We, the organizers, are extremely happy and proud that you are inaugurating the memorial lecture program we are instituting in honor of Professor Kattakayam. Let me extend a warm welcome to you, sir, to this function. Professor Sarabhai, formerly Professor and Head, Madurai Kamaraj University, Tamil Nadu, will be presiding the second session of the program today, where Professor Kattakayam's friends, colleagues, associates, and students recollect personal memories about Professor Kattakayam. Professor Sarabhai, a seasoned academician and scholar, chairing this open forum is appropriate as she cherishes a long-time friendship and association with Professor Kattakayam. A very hearty welcome to you, Professor Sarabhai. Advocate J.J.K. John Kattakayam, Professor Kattakayam's beloved wife, Sri Jibi and Srimati Jisha, son and daughter of Professor Kattakayam, and a number of his relatives and friends are also present in the function. We welcome them all to this function. It was very heartening to note the enthusiastic response we received from various quarters as we announced this memorial lecture. And I noticed that several distinguished dignitaries, like Professor Dr. Dharmaraj Adas, the Vice Chancellor of Sri Shankaracharya University of Sanskrit, and Professor K.S. Ravikumar, the Pro-Vice Chancellor of the same university, and several others. I can see Professor Saravangalam from the US, joining this session. Professor T.K.B. Nair, formerly Professor and Head, Department of Sociology, University of Kerala, and the supervising teacher of Professor Kattakayam. Professor Jairam, formerly Professor at Tata Institute of Social Sciences and Managing Editor, Sociological Bulletin. Professor R. Indira, formerly Professor, University of Mysore, and the President of Indian Sociological Society, formerly. Professor M.N. Panini, formerly Professor at JNU. Professor Chandrasekhar Bhatt of Hyderabad Central University. Professor Virginia Kaka, formerly Deputy Director, Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Guwahati campus, and who held a number of top positions in top universities in India. And we have Professor Mohanty, P.V. Mohanty, the present editor of Sociological Bulletin. Professor, I can see many faces here. Suhan Chowdhury, Professor Karade, Professor Karade is the secretary of the Sociological Association, Indian Sociological Association today, and Dr. Hafiz Muhammad, the president of Kerala Sociological Society, and so on and so forth. And I know the list is not at all complete. Time does not permit listing out all the names at the moment. However, we have also Professor Karen, Karen has taken special interest in this as his two teachers, Professor J.K. his PhD guide and mentor, and Professor Arjuna Padare himself, who has taught him, in his academic, training during this training period, and Professor Tulasi Patel, who was the secretary when Professor Jacob John Kattakayam held the office of the President of Indian Sociological Association, and many more. And so, given the time constraint, let me take the privilege of extending a very hearty welcome to all those who are present here. We, the organizers, are aware of the fact that it is your esteemed regard for and fond memories of Professor Kattakayam that has moved you to participate in this function. We are grateful to Reverend Father Sunny Kunnapalli S.J., the manager, and Dr. J.J.K, the principal of Loyola College of Social Sciences, for generously offering the huge Zoom room for the program. And I welcome them all. Welcome both of them, along with all the faculty members of the institution to this function. In this context, in appreciation and gratitude, I want to remember and welcome Sri Vasudeva Patadiri, the graphic designer, who designed the flyer, brochure, and the backdrop of the program very elegantly and professionally. And Sri Anshu Michael, Assistant Professor, Department of Sociology, Loyola College of Social Sciences, for the valuable technical support rendered for the conduct of the program. As you know, the program is live streamed in YouTube and will be uploaded in the Facebook page of ISRA soon after the program. Let me conclude. Being united with the team of organizers of this great event, who is none other than the legion of those who secured their PhD under the supervision and guidance of Professor Kattakayam, with the able support of the Institute of Social Research and Action. It was a beautiful experience of teamwork and collaboration, where all of us, being driven by our deep sentiments of love, appreciation, and gratitude, worked as a single unit to make this first memorial lecture a meaningful, memorable, and a fitting tribute to Professor Kattakayam. Thank you one and all.
Thank you, sir. What more could we have than the presence of Professor T.K. Uman, Professor Emeritus of Jawaharlal Nehru University and Padma Bhushan awardee, as the president for tonight's event. It's our honor and absolute pleasure to have you, sir, with us. With most respect, may I now invite Professor Uman to preside over the function and deliver the presidential address.
Friends, we are here in a way to celebrate Dr. John Kattakayam's birthday. Today, in 1947, he was born. And his admirers have decided to have the meeting, the memorial meeting and lecture to be delivered today. And I think that was in a way a masterstroke. I am both happy and unhappy about today. I'm unhappy because John, who has been viewed as a young man among us, is no more with us. At the same time, had he lived for some time more, he would have given us many more productive years. He is not a person who was really born in the colonial times, but literally speaking, he was born in colonial India. As I told you, he was born on 12th July in 1947, and India became independent less than a month later. So technically, he was a child who was born during the colonial days, but actually he was the son of free India. Now, John was born in a Syrian Christian family in rural India. I might come back to this after a while, but let me first of all deal with a wide misunderstanding that exists all over the world, not only here in India. Generally speaking, it is believed that the spread of Christianity in India is inextricably associated with the spread of Western colonialism. This is absolutely wrong, because we know that there were 3 pre-colonial Christian communities in the world. One was in Egypt, the other, that is the Coptic Christians, and then there was the Orthodox Christians of Ethiopia, because the emperor became a Christian. And the third was the Syrian Christians of Kerala. Those days there was no Kerala, it was mainly Malabar, Travancore, and Cochin. Now, the Syrian Christians as a community was never Europeanized. They did adopt some of the customs, no doubt, but they lived according to the Christian theologians between 2 worlds: the world of the Persian church and the world of the upper caste Christians, upper caste people. Although they became Christians, they followed the upper caste lifestyles. So they simultaneously belong to 2 different cultures, total lives, as it were. And Kattakayam was the name of John's family. It was conventional to use the family name along with one's own name. Increasingly, this is decreasing, but this was the situation earlier. His father was a well-educated Sanskritist, which is again a privilege of the upper caste, preferably the Brahmins. But gradually, the upper caste Brahmins who took to Christianity followed one of the traditions. They did not completely change everything. And they, at the same time, lived in the life of partly the Christian community. In fact, John's family, that is Kattakayam, is well known to the people of Kerala because his grandfather's brother was a well-known literary figure. He came to be known as Kerala Kalidasan, the Kalidasan of Kerala. He was that important. And if you have seen through it or thought about it, Professor Arjun Appadurai's subject, the theme that he has selected on culture, is something which aptly fits in the ethos of Jacob and his family. Now, this is again another misunderstanding which is widespread almost everywhere, but certainly in Kerala, where the Christians are always people who converted from the lower castes. Nothing can be farther away from the truth. There are people from the lower caste, the middle caste or the backward classes, and the upward caste. And as you know, today, India's policy with regard to the backward classes is very much associated with the kind of social background that they have had. So not that it is forgotten, but it is upheld in certain respects. But the fact of the matter is, the social phenomenon that is called caste is certainly very distinct. And those who belong to the upper caste, who have had the advantage or otherwise of belonging to the upper caste, continue to enjoy the upper status. And those who have had pre-conversion lower caste status are still looked down upon. And although within the Christian church it is believed that equality exists, the fact of the matter is there is as much inequality among Christians, those who were originally from the upper caste and those who were gradually assimilated to the Christian group, but actually belong to the lower caste. John, in a way, I don't know much about his biography. He's a very peculiar person. I don't know much about him, but I'll say some of the things. Usually, people used to go away from Kerala when they study a subject like sociology. because it was not taught very much. There was some colleges or universities where it was taught, but when John was going for studying, it was rarely taught. And I mean, I am one among them. I studied sociology, but not in Kerala. Usually people used to go to West, that means Western states like Maharashtra or Baroda. You had people like G.S. Gure or K.M. Kapadia. Or in Baroda, you had people like M.N. Srinivas, I.P. Desai. But rarely people used to go to North India. If they did go, usually until recently, they went to Lucknow because there were the three famous Mukherjees and Professor J.J.K. Very rarely people would go other places. But when Srinivas moved to Delhi, people started moving there. So people knew who is where and where to go to learn sociology. But John did not opt for any of these places. And I don't know, I couldn't really find it out, why he did go to a place called Jabalpur. I have no intention to bring down the status of Jabalpur, but I'm trying to tell you, he was a man who took things in his stride. He never bothered for big names, but he went to Jabalpur. But a reasonable good department. I knew the people there, and he studied sociology there. Now, the point I'm trying to make is, he was not a person who was very much immediately attracted by what is around, what's talked about, what is famous. But probably my guess is, and I could be corrected by those who knew him much better, he studied both LLB and MA together. That means he could get 2 degrees. Both are worth pursuing. And he took his MA and LLB from there. But he did not pursue, as far as I know, law at all, although his wife was a lawyer by training. And he took to sociology. He came back to Kerala. And although almost everything in Kerala was sociologically unstudied those days, he picked up a tribal community. And that's very again interesting, because tribes always arouse our interest, our curiosity, something different. I mean, traditionally, anthropologists studied the other, those who do not belong to us. That's what the British defined it. So he also studied a tribal community which did not belong to us, maybe the Syrian Christians, the Niles, or the Pulayas, whatever. And he found it very interesting. But more interesting is, in his later career, he has changed his subject. He started focusing on the old age people. That's very, very exciting. A time when in Kerala itself, there are a lot of stories about the old being persecuted. Not all, some of you are very kind people, I know. But a lot of people, and the stories come in the newspapers very frequently about parents being persecuted. But he was a man who was very much devoted to the study of gerontology, and he won some recognition there. I remember He was associated with the International Sociological Association as a member of the research committee which was dealing with old age problems. John was an exception in a broad sense among the academics. Most of us try to focus on the academic work, and very rightly. But if everybody is focusing on the academic work, there won't be anybody to look after other kinds of work. For example, not the co-curricular activities, but there are subsidiary academic activities. To become the head of the department, although there may be competition, quite a few people don't want to take it. But unless somebody takes it, you cannot think in terms of running the department or being a dean. You cannot manage the school to which you belong, the School of Social Sciences or School of Biological Sciences or whatever it is. So John was ready to take such functions. Very rare people are willing to do it willingly, but he did. Also, there was the kind of teaching that was being done, addition to what one is expected to do, what is called the Academic Staff College. I remember to have gone to Trivandrum a couple of occasions when he has invited me because he was very partial. We were friends. But I went there and I found he's spending a lot of time on academic colleges in the university in Trivandrum. Of course, this he did, if I remember correctly, after his retirement from the university. So I can go on doing this. For example, he has done a lot of work for sociology along with his team in Kerala. Similarly, he did very important work in Indian Sociological Society. He was both secretary and president of the Indian Sociological Society. Now, somebody who lived all his time in Delhi, having hailed from Kerala, is not an easy thing to get elected as a president or a secretary. But John did. So there is something very special about him. His capacity to relate with people, his capacity to be in a corner, but work for the whole the organization. So he was very capable of working in any situation he was thrown in. As I told you, he worked locally, that is in Kerala. He worked nationally, although the term is not very correct, but I'm using the term which everybody uses. That means for the whole of India, and globally in association with International Sociological Association. Now, the fact that the J.J.K. Students Collective, Jacob John Kattakayam Students Collective, exists, function, and is the first instance after his death that the concerned students have come together and working very effectively. So the fact that a person like Arjuna Padre, whom I have met possibly a couple of times, he may not remember. I'm such an insignificant person, but I remember him. to attract him to come, not physically, but mentally, and deliver the first memorial lecture is not a small achievement. I've heard about Malayalam artists, particularly cinematography people, I don't want to mention names, have their own fan association. But now I remember, now I know, it's possible even for a sociologist to have a fan association. Here is a fan association which is attractive enough to attract somebody who is far away to come and give a lecture. So what is that motivation? The personality. He has, if you go through the list of his activities, has involved in many, many activities, locally, nationally, and globally. It is too long to narrate, and I will not do that. He was also involved in building institutions. As I already mentioned, the Academic Staff College, I had the opportunity to go there, lecture. So, John has completed 1 year away from us. And if the soul has a manner of thinking, reflecting, he should be thinking that he spent his life meaningfully, 74 years of life, which is not much of a long time. I am at least 10 years more. So I feel very much aggrieved that my young friend is not around. But at the same time, when you look back, you feel gratified that there was such a young man who could do many things. He was certainly a multifaceted personality. And he will be a good example to follow. And those youngsters who are celebrating their gurus, their teachers' life, should have the occasion to celebrate his life and follow his example. And I am very happy that this event is taking place. I did not talk in sociology, and deliberately, because there is somebody who is ready and willing to talk, and we are all very very eager to listen to him. So I don't do understand between you and Professor Padre, and please lend his ears as carefully as possible. Yeah, thank you very much. And I'm told that I should be chairing this session. I think my task is now to invite Professor Padre to give his talk. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much to everyone who has spoken so far, but since Professor Ullman has just spoken and invited me, I think it is incumbent upon me to thank him first. Indeed, we have met when the Center for the Study of Social Systems was quite young, as was the Center for the Study of History, where I gave, I think, perhaps my first public presentation, that is the History Center. So those days, I had some idea of working in a long period of time.
Just a minute, excuse me, and we have the brief inaugural session by the Honorable Minister. I'm sorry, and actually
not at all. I am at your disposal.
I know, I
No
know.
worries. I'm honored.
I'm sorry. So we
No
shall have
worries.
a brief inaugural, address by Honorable Minister now. And Sridhar, please invite Honorable Minister for the inaugural, address.
Thank you, Professor Uman. Listening to you has always been a joy for us. But at this juncture, we would also like to take a minute to extend our deepest sense of gratitude to Mr. George Matthew, Founding Director, Institute of Social Sciences, New Delhi, for extending all the possible support in enabling Professor Uman to preside over the function. Thank you, sir. With this, we are going to witness the inaugural ceremony of Professor J.J. Kattakayam Memorial Lecture. For that, may I invite the Honorable Minister of State of Kerala, Advocate Anthony Raju, Minister for Transport, to deliver the inaugural address. Sir, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. Esteemed guests, my dear friend Advocate Gracie and other family members of Professor Kattakayam and dear friends. It is my proud privilege and good fortune to inaugurate the first Professor Jacob John Kattakayam Memorial Lecture. When I remember Professor Kattakayam, what struck me most was his dynamism. He was forever on the move, organizing seminars, pursuing research projects, traveling from universities to universities, country to countries, delivering lectures, interfacing with governments and international agencies on senior citizen policies, guiding research scholars, mentoring his students, visiting sociology departments across the country, and motivating many new higher education institutions to start sociology departments. Till his last breath, he actively contributed to causes close to his heart. Every year, both of our families traveled together to several places, including pilgrim centers. Our friendship goes back 4 decades when I was a political activist and lawyer in Trivandrum. And Professor Kattakayam was part of a dynamic upcoming generation of scholars at Kerala University studying the sad conditions of marginalized people. Hailing from Idukki district in Kerala, he was acutely aware of the miserable conditions in which Adivasis lived in, and his doctoral thesis, Social Structure and Change Among the Tribals of Kerala, was an important study of that time. With Professor Kattakayam living for several months in Adivasi colonies to gain intimate experience of their lives. At the University of Kerala, he nurtured scores of young sociologists, earned a well-deserved reputation as a dedicated teacher who took deep interest in the welfare of his students. And is even today recognized as a pioneering administrator who tried to improve standards of teaching and research at the University of Kerala by turning the academic staff college of the university into the top-ranking institution of its kind in the country. He was also among the first researchers in Kerala from the early 1980s to recognize the incipient dimensions of aging in Kerala as the joint family system broke down, total fertility rates began declining rapidly, and young people started out migrating in droves. Soon, gerontology became his first love, teaching a popular course on the subject at Kerala University's Department of Sociology and focusing his research pursuits in that area in which he published several papers, conducted research projects, and influenced policy making by governments. He also took great interest in visiting old age homes, conducting awareness camps for senior citizens, and taking up public speaking engagements to generate greater consciousness of elderly abuse in society. I would like to particularly note that his guiding hand has influenced Kerala's senior citizen policies. especially when formulating guidelines on road safety, old age homes, and implementation of the Maintenance and Welfare of Senior Citizens Act. In his last days, he was collaborating with many global elderly rights activists who were lobbying with national governments for ratification of a UN Convention on Rights of older persons. The topic of today's lecture is of particular relevance to our times. The pandemic is forcing many people into poverty. For those like me in the field of politics, and you all who are part of the academic and research community, it is a tough time understanding the challenges, effort, and worrying about the resilience of people in overcoming its unmitigated disaster. I'm hoping Kerala's impressive track record of poverty alleviation, an unbroken tradition of social reform dating 2 centuries, and our peculiar modern social, economic, political, and cultural systems can sustain the developmental narrative despite the economic setback. In contrast, some states in North India are even today held hostage by majoritarian narrative despite the economy being in deep recession. This is not to say Kerala doesn't have problems. Nevertheless, there is a deep commitment to social cohesion, sustainable development, environment conservation, decentralization, strengthening local communities, public health and education, and social security. Our neighboring states like Tamil Nadu and Karnataka have also made rapid strides in development by pursuing their own unique models. There is much for all of us to learn more from each other. A spirit of openness, scientific inquiry, and planetary consciousness are needed today more than ever to solve the problems of the next few decades, especially climate change. I applaud the organization of this lecture for commencing this annual event in Professor Kattakayam's memory by inviting an eminent anthropologist like Professor Arjun Appadurai, whose contributions to improving our understanding of globalization has made him one of our most formidable intellects for the last several decades. It's also fitting that we have Professor T.K. Uman in our midst to chair this event. His study of social movements and his academic journey from Kerala to the prestigious Jawaharlal Nehru University and his seminal contributions to Indian sociology was a source of inspiration for Professor Kattakayam and so many of his peers and subsequent generations of sociologists. I am glad that digital platforms allow such academic fraternities to bond despite space and time, and I am hoping Professor Kattakayam's students continue to do good work and keeps their illustrious teacher's name shining bright. With these few words, cherishing the fond memories of Professor Kattakayam, I inaugurate the Professor Jacob John Kattakayam Memorial Lecture, program instituted by Institute for Social Research and Action and the students, collective of Professor Kattakayam. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. As the Honorable Minister may leave the meeting due to the official engagements, at the outset, may I express our heartfelt gratitude to you, sir, for readily agreeing to us in inaugurating this lecture. It is to be noted in this juncture that Professor Kattakayam and his family has been close associates with the Honorable Minister, and this acquaintance has resulted in enabling his presence here. Thank you so much, sir. With this, without much delay, let's get to the business of the evening. May I now request Professor Umin to take over the session and Professor Arjun Appadurai to deliver the lecture. Thank you. Sir, may you please unmute yourself? Oman, sir, please unmute yourself.
I am not muted.
Yes, certainly. Better. Yes, may I now request Professor Appadurai to enlighten us with his talk.
Well, thank you very much. And because I am aware that this is a major and complicated program, I'll try and be as efficient as possible with the time allotted to me. But I, of course, cannot launch into the content without thanking all those who have spoken up to this point, of whom all of whom share a deep history with Professor Kattakayam. Alas, I never met Professor Kattakayam, but his name was well known to me as someone who has been reading in Indian sociology, which in India, as you know, also is the larger corporation within which anthropology has a small part. Therefore, I'm also honored to speak here today because of that affinity in India between anthropology and sociology, which does not exist in other places in the world. So I have been aware of Professor Kattakayam's journey, but I've already learned a lot more today. And I will say that it's clear that he was a very special man as a teacher, a researcher, a builder, organizer, an administrator. These are indeed rare things. So I'm very honored. I wish I had met him, but that is not to be. So this is the next best thing, to be able to speak to people who knew him, studied with him, taught with him, worked with him. Thanks, of course, to all the organizers, the student organization, the research organization, Professor Anthony Palakkal, his colleagues in the department, and many others, I'm sure, who are involved in organizing this event. And of course, to Professor Oman, whom I indeed have met when I was very young, and he was just a little less young, in the early 70s, which seems like a very long time ago. And also to the minister, Mr. Raju, for his kind and gracious comments also about Kerala, which certainly are relevant to what I'm going to say today. So thanks all of you for this opportunity. And now I'm going to just speak from some reflections and notes rather than a organized academic paper, which usually tells a big story at the beginning, then has a case, which gives you all sorts of information you don't want to hear, and then some conclusions which are inflated. Rather than doing that, I'll just give you a little journey through my interest in this topic about development and culture. So as a provocation, I called it the culture of development and the development of culture, because I wanted to flag the fact that development itself has a set of values, meanings, traditions, ideas behind it. And in that sense, we could say it has a culture or a worldview when people do it, discuss it, model it, etc. And then there is culture itself, which in most societies, including in India today, in spite of the massive battle going on in the political sphere in India, everyone would say they would like to develop culture. Nobody says they want culture to go backwards. So what does that mean, development of culture? So that is just a play on words to say there is some complicated relationship, and I want to cast some light on it. So I'll begin right away by saying that I hope it is in the spirit of Professor Kattakayam to say that I have all my life had a fascination with where culture meets development, but which you can also put in another way. Where does anthropology meet economics? And I've always paid a lot of attention to my colleagues in economics, both in India and working on India and people working elsewhere. But of course, as you all know, Kerala is a big place for economics in Trivandrum, in Delhi, and beyond. And of course, the Kerala model has been much discussed, debated, and talked about. So I think it's a very fitting context to share some ideas about it. And the first and main thing I want to share, and then I want to develop this 3 or 4 issues in this, is that in the last 10 years, I have been writing on why anthropology needs to pay serious attention to the future. So if you think about the history of anthropology, it is always about the past. Traditions, customs, history, cosmology, everything is looking in the rear view mirror. The front view from the car was handed to economics and to its fellow sciences. So they did the future, we did the past. But of course, not being content to do our business alone, we would complain. The economists are not doing right. They don't understand human behavior. They don't. So a lot of complaining business. So what I've been saying for about 10 years now is, why don't anthropologists like me and others also pay attention to the future? In other words, why don't they ask, how do people imagine the future? How do people in any society, however simple, whether it's tribal society, small, remote, marginalized places, or big cities, or big urban or agrarian civilizations, what is their view of the future? It's a simple question, but you can read thousands of anthropology books and there won't be a line about the future. All you know is that why do people do this? Why do they worship this? How do they do this ritual? How do they rank others? But if you say, what do they want? Where do they want to go? What is the destination? Whether they are Santals or whether they are Trobrianders or whether they are from Sudan, what is the map? So I have been pressing the idea in various writings, and I will come to that again, that we need to start asking this question in a serious way. And if we do, we will then have a more fruitful and robust dialogue with economics and other policy sciences concerned with development. That is, those who are concerned with improving the distribution of wealth, the distribution of justice, the distribution of power. So until we ourselves as anthropologists or sociologists pay some attention to the social formation of people's views of the future, we can't have that conversation. Because you're talking about two different things then. We are like ships crossing in the night. One is talking about the future, one is talking about the past, and both are complaining about each other. And the complaint, of course, as Professor Kattakayam knew very well, takes many forms, some of them quite sophisticated forms, like anthropologists spend a long time in one place and then write a book. Economists, especially those concerned with policy, look at the whole country, look at whole regions, and of course, necessarily have to use aggregate techniques, statistics, sampling, etc. But I have been at many events where there was a lot of debate, sometimes quite violent debate, about how these two can meet. If all I can tell you is about my village and all you can tell me is about all India numbers, where is the conversation? You have to ignore me, I have to ignore you, keep on going. Then if you feel a little irritated, you go back and study your village again. So that is the re-study model. I go again and again to the same place. So the place is changing, but I'm still talking about that place. So I still don't have any relevance to the aggregate conversation. So these are some complicated methodological issues, but I won't dwell on them today. I will just say that there is a problem. And the problem I want to do now, I want to address, is that if we take on this invitation, and I believe that someone like Professor Kattakayam and many of the distinguished people who are present today would agree that some new and vital dialogue between anthropologically, culturally, socially oriented disciplines and economics and policy-oriented disciplines should occur in a kind of revitalized way and not by simple complaint. One way to go is to think about the issue of poverty. How can we come together on the issue of poverty and the closely related issue of inequality? We know, of course, they are not the same. You can have very rich people who are also unequal, or as Professor Oman said, you can have inequality even at the top. And I often say in India, one of my aphorisms is You can identify the top, but there is no bottom in caste society. Why? Even the lowest person has a barber in the next village or a washerwoman in the next village. So the bottom is impossible to find empirically. There is no empirical bottom because everybody has somebody below. Above, there may be some closure. Some Brahmin family or something may be seen as apical. But these are interesting problems. They relate to poverty and they relate to inequality. But on the poverty matter, I want to say that my inspirations have come from several people. One is our own very distinguished Professor Sen, who has written a lot about Kerala, among other things. I'm talking of his larger work on capacities and capabilities. Another is the great development economist, Albert Hirschman, whose work I've learned a lot from. And the last is the philosopher Charles Taylor. And I've drawn on all of them. I'll tell you why I bring up these names. Because I have written, and some of you may know this, please forgive me if it is familiar to you. I have developed an idea related to the dialogue between anthropology and economics called the capacity to aspire. So I'm treating aspiration. That means hope. See, nobody is going to change their situation if they are hopeless. You must have some hope when you look at the future. However poor you are, however deprived you are, when hope is dead, development will never happen. Nobody can force you to develop. You have to have some forward-looking motivation, which we can call hope or aspiration. I have argued in some written work that aspiring is itself a capacity, and that capacity is unequally distributed. Why is it unequal? Not because people's brains are unequally distributed. This is not a racial theory or a caste theory. It is not a culture of poverty theory. It is saying that if you don't have much experience of mobility, of education, moving, negotiating, and navigating, your capacity will not be so well developed. It's like a muscle. If you're never using your arms are going to atrophy. So my point of view in developing the idea of the capacity to aspire is that it is a capacity which needs to be exercised. And if you are constantly put out of the domain of mobility, of the domain of voice, speaking, expressing your views, etc. If, for example, you're a Dalit woman in the heart of today's UP, you cannot speak very much, nor can you aspire very much. How are you going to develop the capacity? So the message I take from this is that since the capacity to aspire is what I have called in writing, a navigational capacity, and people who are rich have a lot of practice in how do you go from a small town to a big city? How do you go from Delhi to Dubai or to the New York? Then you have 100 stories like that, which you pass on to the rest. The rest also hear it. But if you're a Dalit child in the heart of UP or Bihar, or for that matter, Maharashtra, Karnataka, or Kerala, the stock of narratives available to you is very limited. Where are you going to aspire? It reminds me of a very old book that perhaps some of the people in the audience will remember, Blossoms in the Dust by Kusum Nair. And she asked several farmers, if you could have as much as you wanted of land, how much do you want? 2 acres, 3 acres. She was stunned. She gave an open question and the answer was so limited. That is because the capacity to aspire was not richly developed. And its non-development is itself a fact of inequality. It's not a fact of nature or biology. So the point of this part of my discussion is that if we want to change the culture of development from being a kind of technocentric, patronizing thing where we are going to force people to become like us, whether the us is Delhi or the us is New York or the us is Geneva, there is some us that we want people to become like us. But if we want to move away from that, I would say very concretely, and I know that Professor Kattakayam was a man with very concrete interests in elder abuse, elder care, gerontology, and many other fields. So in his spirit, I say, when you have a development policy, whether it's at the national level, regional level, Kerala level, or some tiny single village, ask yourself, is this policy going to strengthen the capacity of poor people to aspire? Is it going, now it can do many things. You can build a dam, you can build a well, you can bring medicines, you can do this, you can do that, dispensaries, schools. But every time you do something, I have a simple suggestion. Please think about whether you are bringing people into the process, not just because it's a nice thing to say, participatory democracy, participatory. So everybody likes participation, nobody is against it. But you need to ask a more specific question, in my view, if you are a development-oriented person, which is, am I helping people to improve their capacity to aspire? Because if you don't, the people who are low down will never speak up. They will never hope. They will never want more than they have. And then the chance of their resisting anything, changing anything, improving anything is zero. You can have any wish you like as an outsider, but you cannot plant that unless you develop that capacity. Now, I want to shift the frame for a moment to say that, unfortunately, and this is the second part of my talk, if we want to talk about poverty, poverty is not an abstract numerical fact. 60% are below this, 70% are above that. That is interesting, it's important, but poverty is also about how you think and the conditions of your daily life, of dignity, humiliation. All these are crucial parts of poverty. And the biggest connection to poverty today in places like India, but also many places, I just refer to India because that is what we are all interested in, but it's not restricted, is the problem of minorities. And here I want to change the frame for a moment to say that in a place like India, we all know, I don't have to bring this news to this audience, that we have a massive fundamental crisis in democracy. And the simple thing, instead of giving all the facts which you know and bringing them to you, which is useless, I'll simply say there is more impunity today. For example, in Adityanath's regime in UP, which is the state almost the size of Europe, so it's not a small place, as you all know, there is no accountability, zero. So anybody can do anything to people below them. And not only people at the top do that, people way down do that. As we know from incidents related to Muslims, Dalits, women, the list goes on. And they are more brutal each day. And they are more open each day. And the police are involved, the state is watching. Nobody is intervening. The death of Stan Swamy is a singular case of killing somebody with impunity. Yeah, we did it. And then meanwhile, all the other Bhima Corona people are still in jail. Half of them are unhealthy. He was just the worst of, the oldest, the most tragic. But a case is a case of homicide. Let's not put other words on it. So impunity. The main targets of this impunity are minorities. And here I want to make only one important observation on which I've written quite a lot. And that is that the idea of minorities and their relationship to the nation and so on brings to light for me one very important thing, is that every nation state, I mean, without exception, the entire UN list, from the poorest to the richest, the very form of the nation state has an ethnic underpinning. There is no nation, India, Pakistan, China, Japan, Korea, you can go on, that does not have an idea that our people are somehow special. Hannah Arendt has said this long ago, I'm just borrowing. Under every national idea is an ethnic idea. We are special. Otherwise, what's the difference between Indians and Pakistanis? There is some line at Vaga. Who cares? No, because we think there is something. And that something which makes us Indian, makes them Pakistani, has become in modern times religion. In other places, it is something else. You are Serbian, I'm Croatian. That is not religion. It's something else, but it's in your blood. It's a racial, biological sort of idea. And nations are made out of special human beings who somehow change mysteriously when the border is crossed. in this idea of nation, which is in fact universal, it's modern, but now it's everywhere. Who is not a nation state? Very few people. And who doesn't want a nation state if they're not a nation state, including Palestinians, Kashmiris, etc. Because that's the only thing we know, that we have to have a nation in order to be anything. But the trouble is, once you have the nation form, you immediately have the idea that some people are full citizens because they are somehow, in a kind of physical way, full citizens. And the people who are visitors or identified with some alien religion or something like that become minorities. So the key point is minority is not an empirical fact. It's not like the table and chair. It is something that comes into being historically. Somebody names you. And it is a modern phenomenon. It's about 2-3 centuries old, maximum. So if you go to Roman law and Roman society and say, where is the minority? Or you ask Akbar, what is your policy towards minorities? It's a nonsensical question. There is no such category. There are poor people, rich people, craftsmen, this, that. Minority is our idea. It's a modern liberal social idea. So furthermore, it is an idea that's not doing very well. The minute you enter that categorization, you are in trouble because you are seen as an incomplete citizen, partial citizen, undesirable citizen. And the minute you get an idea of nation in which the ethnic subtext becomes strong, as it is in India today, minorities have no place. So the whole idea of diversity, plurality, inclusion, affirmative action, all these things in the constitution lose their meaning because the fact is only one kind of person is a proper Indian. Everybody else has to go. Now, of course, we know the history of NCR, CAA, all that is trying to realize that vision, however imperfectly, that there is one kind of correct Indian, the rest must go. Must go means, and we know we have explicit speeches, Muslims, Dalits, this one, that one, must go. In other words, they must die or they must leave. These are the choices. So I want to say that this challenge or this problem is extremely serious when we talk of culture and development. Why? Because culture in this case is not only a matter of what I have called the capacity to aspire, where people have specific ideas. Health means this, wealth means that. And I've often written about this. If you ask a Buddhist, what is your idea of wealth? He may say, I don't like it at all. It ties me down, this, that. If you go to Islam, you might have some other idea of that, or very particular things. Do you want to take risks in the stock market? Well, if you're operating with Islamic law, you'll have very particular ideas about interest and so on. If you're a Hindu, you may not. So when people think about the future, there's always a cultural dimension, but I am talking about one other dimension, which is the cultural subtext inside nationalism, which tends to be exclusionary and tends to be majoritarian. Let me put it in this simple way. We often say this or that country has become majoritarian. India is turning in the majoritarian direction. But I am telling you, majoritarian is always in the blood of the nation state. Only question is, when does it surface? When does it become politically active? When do the people who think that way become dominant, like the BJP? That is a very serious, complicated question. But it is not that somebody gave an injection from outside of majoritarianism. It's already there. And then it is built upon, played upon, and in India, of course, has become pathologically normal. That is the normal position. Everybody else is seen as abnormal, dissenting, deviant, and so on. A very troubling state of affairs. So let me simply, in the short time left to me, make the best of it by saying we have to actually bring a cultural perspective to development. To bring, in other words, a cultural perspective to changing the conditions of inequality and poverty. Let's say that all of us in India, certainly in Kerala, but really everywhere, would like to do that, would like to have fewer people below the poverty line. At least everyone says that in politics. And ordinary middle class people certainly would not say only I should be middle class. Let everybody grow, develop. So everyone wants some change. And I think no one, however conservative or even right-wing they are, would like to say, let's keep 70% of India in dire poverty. Nobody says that. Everybody says, look, let's improve. The battle comes, how do you improve? That is when the politics enters and so on and so forth. So what I'm saying, what I would like to now move towards a conclusion by saying that if we want to change the conditions of inequality and poverty, and I believe that the man we are honoring today, Professor Kattakayam, certainly had his eye in all the work that I'm aware of and which has been discussed today on changing conditions for the better. On, in other words, changing the nature of welfare and well-being for a majority. And in this case, he was focused on elders, others are focused on Dalits, or others are focused on women, all fine. Each has a place. I'm saying we have two jobs to do, two separate jobs. Either of them by itself won't do the trick. One job is to bring anthropologists to understand that they must do research on how ordinary people see the future. Number one. Number two, people who actually do development work must develop an interest in strengthening the capacity to aspire of those people who today live at the bottom of various systems. Third and most important is the matter of the nation state, majoritarianism, and culture. We have to all work, whether we are economists, whether we are development people, whether we are applied, whether we are theoretical, whatever we are, we have to find a way to dissociate the idea of culture as a space of aspiration. In other words, a culture as a framework within which people decide what is the good life. That is very important. We have to disassociate that from the idea of this is our culture, national culture, Indian culture. And if you are not one of us, then you're a minority, you're an outsider. At worst, you are an invader, you're a terrorist. It's the wrong direction. So we need to separate these two ideas of culture and Sanskriti. And I will end with a provocation, which I hope you will not take as offensive, since I have clearly made my opposition to the current regime in India very clear. Let me conclude by saying that even the great Jawaharlal Nehru, in his major works, set us on the road to this era by looking for the essence of India. He always said, what is there in the diversity? Where is the unity? The minute you ask this question, the minute you do this, you are on the road to that kind of cultural essentialism, ethno-nationalism. Of course, it would be shocking to say that Jawaharlal Nehru thought like that, but I would say the framework allows then this later shift that has happened in the last 15 or 20 years. So if we don't take care of that problem, we will not be able to take care of the problem of thinking about the capacity to aspire of those who are currently excluded. So let me stop on that note in the hope and express the wish and hope that if Professor Kattakayam were present today, he would have found some merit in these thoughts and perhaps some resonance with his lifelong accomplishments. So thank you very much.
Sheetal?
Sir, Uman sir, please unmute.
Please.
Sir, we understand that you're talking, but then it. Uman sir, I think we understand that you are talking, but your mic is on the mute mode.
Please unmute yourself. Unmute yourself. On the mic. Click on the mic. Okay. Okay.
Hello.
Yes, you are audible. You are audible. Yes, sir.
Yes. Thank you. No, I just want to say thank you to Professor Arjuna Padare. And as we know, there is a time set apart for interaction. And this is the time for interaction. Of course, it is not compulsory that you must interact, but those who are impelled should interact and should ask the questions. And Professor Padare will note it down and will eventually answer. Would you prefer all the questions at one go or one by one?
Professor Roman, can I raise an observation?
Yes, I mean, just let me clarify this. You want to say about the modality? Because I'm asking whether you want to.
Professor Arjun, your mic is mute. Please unmute your mic.
I'm sorry. So sorry. It is unmuted itself. I don't know why.
Okay.
Anyway, I meant to say if either Professor Umen or Professor Palakkar or Sheetal could simply take 2-3 questions and then give me a chance. Otherwise, it will become too much. And if I answer each question, it'll be not enough, So,
Okay.
Questions, a cluster.
Let me ask, who would like to ask the first question?
I am S. Gurusamy from Gandhigram, Tamil Nadu.
Yes,
Would like to raise
Ashok Cole as well.
First of all, I must. First of all, I must appreciate the well-delivered lecture by Professor Apathurai, presided by Professor T.K. Umman, and organized by Professor Anthony Palakkal. My question is, of course, culture of development and development of culture, both are dearer to Professor Jacob John Kattakayam. Now the question is whether this culture of development and development of culture is people-centered or development-centered. Because if it is a culture of development and people-centered, there is a need for change in the mindset, so that the culture of development occurs among the people as people-centered. And culture is development itself. Now the problem is poverty, inequality, undesirable condition, a dislike type of condition, migration, unemployment, like that. A lot of problems are there. Given these problems, how this development will take off in respect of culture of development or development of culture? That is my question.
Thank you. Anybody else would like to ask?
Yes, Ashok Cole. Ashok Cole.
Yeah.
Ashok Cole.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes,
Uman sir. Excuse me, sir. Uman sir.
Yes.
With due respect to the audience here, those who want to raise a question, please unmute yourself. The mute has been disabled. So you may please unmute if you would like to talk. And Uman sir, there are a couple of questions which are coming in the chat box also. If you would like to see them, or if you want me to read it out to you, I can also do that. There are a couple of questions coming in the chat box.
You can do that, but as far as the unmuting is concerned, this has been done several times. Now the person who is standing here to help me says that it is unmuted.
No, Professor, sir, this is not about you. For those who want to ask questions, the instruction was to those who want to ask questions.
That announcement you should make. Those who wanted to ask questions should unmute themselves. Okay?
Yeah, that's.
Now, I am telling one question has already been raised. Is there any question which is related to that?
Ashok Cole.
Which can be raised now? Yes.
Could I speak Ashok Cole, sir? Ashok Cole.
Yes.
Sir, my direct question would be, I believe that linearity of culture can only take place if there is a blending of cultures. If we want to have a dialogue with anthropology for a future sake, the commingling of cultures or composite culture is nothing like it. It doesn't happen. It is only the blending. If you take Bhakti movement or take any other movements, there are historical evidences, historical segments when blending of cultures have taken place that might have become culture for a pluralism. Otherwise, commingling of cultures is always a binary and it's always a judgmental. How would you think that could blending of cultures be possible if we have a future dialogue?
Yes. What is important is what is Dr. Apadure thinks. Wait for me, wait for a while. Yeah. Anybody else would like to ask?
Sir, can I ask? Sukant Chaudhary.
Yeah. Yes, Sukant.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, please.
It was wonderful, but after teaching for so many years, I'm from Lucknow University and Delhi University student, Anthro student, Anthro MPhil and PhD.
Yes.
What I'm trying to say that we have been teaching culture and would ask a simple question to the student every year. Food is given by culture or nature? Everybody will say nature, but they have been taught that food is given by culture. Okay, according to the needs, A. And B, unless a culture is taken into cognizance, the development program fails. Umang Sahab has written many articles on this, including Dubey. And C, what is happening these days, whatever you said, as aspiring, futuristic, and poverty. We are, and including, you have talked about the government, what is, I am from Uttar Pradesh, what Yogi ji or Modi ji, what all of them are doing. Is there a shift in cultural structure these days? Because we have a dependence on authority. That itself is another culture. And we always had a dependence on authority during Vedic era everywhere. Why to talk about caste and politics? Can there be a society without any caste system? Can there be a society without any inequality? No, never. Because 3,000 years they have suffered. Now you give them 3,000 years of reservation. So the whole point is there a shift in cultural structure? Yes. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Now, 3 questions have been raised. And may I now request Dr. Apadure to come to the rescue of these people?
Well, thank you, Professor Omen. These are all large questions, and I suspect all the questioners are very much not in need of my assistance, but I can add my opinion.
Yes.
Certainly, happily.
Yes.
But very briefly, because indeed these are grand issues. So I'll just give a quick mental association with each of them. Yeah. First question, Professor Guruswamy. People and development பத்தி கேட்டு ரொம்ப சந்தோஷம். தமிழ்நாடுல நீங்க பேசுறீங்க. நான் கொஞ்சம் சின்ன பதில் கொடுக்கிறேன். சின்ன பதில். I am on the people-centered side. So when I say capacity to aspire, what I'm pointing to is it is not enough to ask people to help in making a map of the well. Please show us where the panchayat is. That is not participation. Participation means taking their views of what is desirable into account. So my view is indeed people-centered is what development has to be. But the idea currently of what is participatory and all is to me a bit limited. It has to go further and make a systematic inquiry, which is why as academics we are helpful. To systematically ask, the way we ask, what is the rear view mirror? Let us ask, what is the open front mirror? What do people desire? Not assume. You see, everybody wants health, wealth, and happiness. Everybody wants education. No, ask, what do you want? And you may be surprised. And of course, we have to do it in a sophisticated manner. Not come one day for half an hour and say, give me a list of your wants. No, you have to live there. You have to spend time. You have to do surveys, this and that. But the objective should be that. So I think for development to be people-centered, which is what I believe your question was saying, it needs to take visions of the future, of hope, of aspiration, of goals, and assume that everybody has goals. Don't assume that people don't have goals and that you have to tell them what to want. Number one. Professor Kaul, Ashok Kaul, blending of dialogues, coming of cultures. Yes, I'm a big believer in all that. As you know, in the US academic world, that is now a full-time industry. Hybridity, syncretism, dialogue, mixing, matching, blending. It is like a kitchen, it's like a blender. We have all the settings are available, from the grinding to the juicing are available. So I'm with you. And I am from that system, so I breathe that. But again, as with people-centered, I think we need to be a little careful, because this is not just a general mantra or slogan that I say hybrid, commingling, and then everybody goes, it's like Kumbh Mela, everybody's commingling. No, I think the idea is we have to ask what needs to blend. What should be in dialogue? So for example, I'll give you a provocative example. Let there be a dialogue between Hindus and Muslims. But the minute you come to the table, don't say, do you believe in jihad? Do you believe in killing people? I mean, who asked? Is that the key thing to commingle? No. The question should be, what do you want to worship? Where would you like to live? Don't immediately ask some core value. Do you believe in the afterlife? Do you believe in reincarnation? I mean, these are not, to me, useful issues to create dialogue. So I'm all for commingling, dialogue, contact, syncretism, but it should be targeted and targeted and selective, and that commingling should happen around where people want to go. As we say in Hindi, manzil, not where did you come from. I always think in transportational terms. I hope the minister would be happy about this. That the question is not, did you leave from VT? The question is, do you want to go to Dadar? Do you want to go to Kurla? That is the place the commingling should happen. So that is my view of blending, which I'm all for, but it should be targeted. Finally, Professor Chaudhary, your question is a bit more of a, shall we call it, googly or in-swinger, because it has many components in it. And every time I saw the ball, it then turned again. So I have to take something out of it, which may not be all of what you had in mind. I do think it is utopian to think that inequality will vanish. Power relations will go and there will be heaven on earth. I am not that kind of believer. And in fact, most people who believe, Christians, Buddhists, Hindus, Muslims, actually don't think heaven on earth is going to be here. They think it will be later, somewhere else, in some other location. But still we have ethical obligations to push towards that in our ordinary lives. That I don't mean push towards some idea of heaven, but to correct things so far as we can. Mathematicians have a term called asymptote. You want to approach asymptotically towards some state where everybody is not determined by caste, by gender, by race. Are they old? Are they young? Are they black? Are they blue? We can say there will always be some of that. But because there will be some of it, we don't need to make it the center of the constitution and say, okay, everything should be like that. Let the most powerful be. So authority, I'll make one last comment. You are right, of course. I think something very serious is going on with authority now, because in some ways, what is going on is a return to some royal idea. In other words, kings do certain things. They do it in a certain way. They've always done so in India, Raja Dharma, so on and so forth. The trouble is, in the era of elections, money, corruption, this, that, those dharmic ideas cannot be executed in a dharmic manner. So dharmic goals lead to adharmic means, because we are in modern times. We are not in Pataliputra. That is the problem. So I hope you see, I agree with you, but I think we disagree perhaps on what to do in the current environment where so much has changed, which is not within our control. Things have happened in history, technology, contact, colonization, all this we didn't choose, but it's happened. So we cannot reset the clock and say, let's go back to yesterday at 4 o'clock. That to me is unrealistic. It's not even an ideological matter. It just can't be done. Time is one way. What to do? Anyway, I stop there, Professor Oman. Thank you.
Anybody else?
So can I raise a question? My name is Tanuja.
Yeah.
I've just pasted it in the chat box, but I'll read it again. I have tried to work with Professor Appadurai's capacity to aspire with reference to my ethnography. So my question is this: the capacity to aspire, as I read it in your article and as I hear you here, seems to be closed on wanting more with reference to a dominantly agreed standard, because we're looking at poverty alleviation and inequality. But speaking in the context of Adivasis and the aspiration for subsistence, can it have a different swing in what should be aspiration? Because that's how I argue. Because I remember your article where you say those who have more exposure are better in their capacity to aspire.
Right.
But speaking from the context of the Adivasis I work, maybe they don't fall under that exposure that you're talking about, but I still think they have a very definitive capacity of aspiration, which is again, not like quantifying more. I mean,
yes,
wanting.
I agree. I think you've raised a very important point. In the interests of making my argument, even in the written form in 2004 when I wrote it, but also today, to make it accessible, I of course done some sort of reduction, shall we say, or simplification, which gives the impression, which you are right, is that the framework is already always set. And the question is, do you want more? Do you want more houses? Do you want more cows? Do you want more daughters? I mean, but my real intention is to say that the capacity to aspire crucially should involve what you want, not just how much you want. See, so if you want to be left alone by people, that should also be a permissible aspiration. Yes. So if there are people, whether they are Adivasis or whether they are others, who say, above all, leave me alone in the way I organize and plan my life, that should be taken seriously. And that is not a how much question. In fact, it's a less question, not a more question. Give me less state, less surveillance, less police. That is also good. Perfectly fair. So I think we are actually in agreement, Ms. Tanuja, or Dr. Tanuja, or Professor Tanuja, as the case may
Not
be.
yet.
Not yet. It's coming soon. We say coming soon. I would say we are actually on the same side. And I think there is a crucial qualitative dimension here. It is not just asking people's opinions of how much they want in the existing basket. It has to be about the shape of the basket. And in the radical form, it has to be even about questioning the basket. That too should be included. If you don't want, for example, the controversial cases, if you don't want vaccination, if you're a community living in a place where vaccination is seen as dangerous, that has to be taken seriously. You may not agree, but then there has to be a debate. There has to be education. There has to be negotiation. You can't just say, you're stupid people, line up. We have a policeman standing with a lathi and we'll vaccinate you. And I don't mean today for COVID. I mean for smallpox historically, the big issue. So I believe that you cannot talk about people-centered or participatory or some other kind of thing without being ready to go the full distance. The full distance means somebody may say, look, please just leave us. Leave the village. We don't want the world back here. Then you have a very serious issue. You can't just say, no. We will come. You need water. Plus you need to move from jawar to bajri. Plus you need to grow sugarcane instead of subsistence. Now you tell us what you want. That's a ridiculous proposition. So I think we are really on the same side.
Nano. Thank you so much, sir.
Shall I ask one question, sir? Can I ask one question?
Yes, please.
I'm Professor Manish Verma from Babasaheb Bhimrao Ambedkar Institute, sir. Am I allowed to ask one question?
Yes.
First of all, congratulations to Professor Appadurai for such a enlightening and insightful lecture. And it was really a thought-provoking lecture and brought so many hidden facts in front of us. Sir, my basic question is, in fact, my curiosity is that you have talked about, developing the capacity of people to aspire. It is a very noble idea. I must appreciate that. But at the same time, my hunch is that even if we are able to aspire people to think about bigger things in their lives, but without providing the basic infrastructure, basic facilities, basic capacity to derive those goals, to derive those ends, how it would be possible? That will end up resulting into a contradictory kind of situation, that people are having high level of aspirations and the state is not able to provide even the basics to them. So don't you think that it will result into chaos kind of situation?
It's an excellent question. Thank you for raising it. Thank you for your kind remarks. I totally actually agree with you that this capacity to aspire has to be part of a menu, larger menu. You can't just say, you are not aspiring, I will help you think about bigger things and then leave it at that. It has to be part of a bigger menu. And the bigger menu has to be about policies and actions taken by the state. See, this is the unspoken part. Somebody, some authority which is not local, communal, and community-based cannot, for example, provide clean drinking water. That's a national issue. And as you know, in India, I always say to people, explain to me why we do not have potable drinking water in every single village. We have the best engineers, hundreds of thousands of them. We have the best pure scientists. We have the best plumbers. We have the best programmers, and we cannot provide potable drinking water. That means there is a problem, big problem. And you're right that without that, those kind of things, roads, lighting, this, that, you cannot ask people to change their aspirations, because then what will happen is what in the old days in social science, I think Professor Umin will remember this, we call revolution of rising expectations. My expectations rise, nothing is there. I say, let's go kill some people. You know, that's what happens. So that's what you're talking about. So you're right that my idea is a very one part of a bigger picture in which, of course, we need enlightened provision of infrastructure, capacity to be educated, this, that. That cannot come from individuals changing their aspirations. It comes from somewhere else. So I didn't address that today, and you're absolutely right in saying that A without B is either going to be useless or is going to be worse. So I agree with you, and it's a very important question, which I did not address here at all today, but it's a big topic.
Okay. Who else?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Sahu, Professor.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, it's a kind of a question, not a question, a comment. When you say about the culture, and we always say that the increasing rationality has also, provided us a culture of voice, and in education.
Sorry, culture of
voice, culture of voice.
Voice.
Yeah. Yes. And when you see this increasing education and increasing rationality, the society is now, the intellectuals are, inclining towards culture of silence. And how you look at the Indian intellectuals in this context, what is your take on this?
So I think if I understand your question, you're using the term void, right? We are like rationality.
V-O-I-C-E, voice. V-O-I-C-E, voice.
Voice, cultural voice. Okay. Yeah, got it. I was thinking it was a D, V-O-I-D. Okay, so rationality, voice. Yeah, well, I think you mean by rationality that at one time, intellectuals saw their job as sort of bringing a rational vision. Let's say the Nehru, we must have technology, we must have this, we must have a kind of rational plan, everybody must line up and India will progress, that kind of. So today, let us just say we have moved from Yojana Bhavan model to people's model, meaning people must take part, etc. That is voice. Voice, that means if I don't like something, I can speak up, etc. So there is a new democratic impulse. The trouble is that we have a very bad masala of the old model and the new model. That means a lot of talk about people, but the rules are coming still from South Bloc. In fact, more are coming from there.
Yes,
so actually Nehru, who thought he knew everything was good for the country, actually left room. Now the people who are saying we are all for the people and this and that actually are not. So we have a kind of ulta business going on. And so I think that intellectuals, to go to your question, which is a very big category, are in a very difficult position, except for those who are 100% for the way things are, pro-Hindutva, pro-BJP, pro-Modi, and those who are 150% against, who would like all of this to wipe out. But the people who are open and trying to have reasonable debate, I think are in a very difficult position, because when they want to make policies which are, let us say, based on reason, but taking into account local aspirations, voice, etc., it is extremely difficult for them to either formulate or execute these things, because there is a huge 800-pound gorilla in the room, which is the state, which more or less does what it likes. I mean, today and yesterday in Delhi And in the north, there are meetings about the Central Vista project. Hundreds of crores are going where we could have hospitals and so on. So I can have any idea about reason and voice, but if the large part of the country's treasury is going somewhere else, it doesn't matter. So we have to face that fact that intellectuals cannot, even more than before, they are helpless even when their intentions are good. Today, I hope that changes, of course.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Yes, sir.
My name is Aditya.
Sir, I have one question, sir. My name is Nagaraj, sir. Woman, sir, can I ask a question, sir? My name is Nagaraj.
Just a moment, because this lady had.
Okay.
Abha, sir, Abha Chauhan.
Yes, please.
Should I ask, sir?
Please.
Okay, thank you so much for this enlightening lecture, Professor Appadurai. Somewhere you were mentioning about the question of majority and minority, in this situation. And majority, as you said, is more of a phenomena or a result of modernity, and majority actually comes into being created, or how it is formed basically. And so if majority is formed, then minority is also formed as a vis-a-vis of majority. So I just wanted to understand this, that how do you understand this relationship of majority and minority, and how is it constructed basically? And there are situations where you realize that you are also being made a part of majority, though you don't agree with many of the things that are associated with that. So it is your birth into a particular caste or community or religion by which you become a part of the majority, but there are your own views and values which make you very different subjectively from that majority group. So how do you tackle this dilemma? That's the question.
Thank you. Thank you very much. A very important, deep question. Yes, I think both majority and minority are kind of co-created, and both are historical. In that sense, you might say they're artificial, but artificial doesn't mean they can be just dissolved, because they have been there for a long time and people are drawn into them. That's a key point. So when I say something is constructed, etc., I don't mean therefore it's flimsy, like you can just crush it into dust and throw it away. It's very solid, even if it has a history, both. So in India, Hindu, Muslim. So people are dragged into both. That is also there. See, nobody comes willingly into some identity which is not local to them. So to run around saying, I'll kill you because I'm a Hindu, you're a Muslim, there's a lot of work involved. So somebody has to draw you into it, persuade you, seduce you, coax you, threaten you. So there's a lot of socialization on both sides. Now, the difference is that with minorities, there's nothing elected. You have no choice. That is how you are named. That is how you are seen. That is how your fate is determined. That is how jobs are allotted to you. How can it makes no sense if you are in India today, and if you belong to a religious minority, say Christian, Parsi, Muslim, whoever, and Muslims are the central problem in this regard, they can say again and again, look, we are Indian like you. But everything in the law, everything on the street, everything in the police says you're a minority. And specifically you're Muslim, say if in the case of Muslim, you're actually a Pakistani Indian. Where do you escape from this? So you're absolutely right that these are categories into which majority also is drawn. It's not pre-existing. So somebody has to invent this idea at some point, like a patent. Hey, this is Hindu, good category. But you see, then there has to be, if I may coin a phrase, a kind of conceptual jihad is conducted. So then people are, if you like, forced. So I'm not worried about love jihad, but I am not a friend of conceptual jihad. That is where people are forcibly socialized into certain identities, self-understanding, and so on. But unfortunately, all around the world, and I like to give this example from the early 90s in ex-Yugoslavia, when these countries like Serbia, Croatia, and all came into being, there were hundreds of thousands of people who were products of Serbo-Croatian mixed marriages, but they were told, pick a team. Are you Serbian or are you Croatian? No, my mother is Serbian, my father is Croatian, but they had to pick. See, that is straight out force say on the Serbian side, saying if you're not Serbian, you leave, So you have to choose. So you're 100% right that we need to look not only at how these categories come into being, but then how they are enforced and how they are forcibly used as tools of repression, domination, recruitment. That doesn't happen in a simple way. There's a lot of stuff there, and that's why our social science techniques are very important, very relevant. So thank you.
Just one moment. Who was the previous person?
Sir, my name is Nagaraj, sir, from Hyderabad, sir.
Come.
Sir.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, Professor Women, sir, for giving me this opportunity. And it's really a great lecture, sir. I am so happy to see you on this virtual mode. Thanks to Professor Arjun Appadare, sir, for the excellent lecture. So my question is somehow related to Professor Abhat Chauhan, but I'm taking a different perspective.
But you start asking before she asked.
Yeah, sir. So my question is, sir, as a school-going children, we read that India stands for tolerance. Tolerance is the defining feature of Indian society or Indian ethos. And you also mentioned that the modern state is a colonial phenomenon. It's basically had a history of only 200 years. But my question is, what are the factors which are primarily preventing the cultural tolerance or the roots of cultural tolerance of India to negotiate the pluralism, and why we are moving towards the segmentalization of society instead of cosmopolitanism? So that's what my question is. My question is, what are the factors? Why can't we reinvent the cultural roots which are already there in India? If I take the epistemological understanding of Professor T.N. Madan, who also talks about the idea of secularism in India is different from the idea of Western secularism, where he says that Western secularism is basically an outcome of Christianity, but Indian secularism has a different perspective. Just thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Sorry, sir.
Your name is?
Nagaraju, sir. Nagaraju from Hyderabad. Nagaraju.
Nagaraju, that is Telugu speaker. Not
yes,
my mother tongue.
Man, sir. Yes,
not my mother tongue. What to do in India, this is how we operate. We're always trying to see. Anyway, you're from Delhi. Yes. That's a bigger point.
Yes,
you're from the nation's capital.
I'm from Hyderabad, sir. I'm from Hyderabad, sir.
You've been transformed. Anyway, I will take your question regardless where you are from. Very good point. I think, I'm going to answer it very seriously, and I would say it is true that today we are witnessing a kind of hijack of culture by some idea of majority, which is a Hindu idea, which is an ethno-national idea. So we know it has very particular content, but it is somehow hijacked. So Sanskriti culture becomes that. That is what it is. It's not about anything else. Now, that part I agree, and I have a certain analysis in my work, in my writing over the years. I've been wondering, how does this happen? When does it happen? What are the forces? But the other part I must cast some doubt on, which is a very, as Professor Ummen said about some other misunderstandings, let me add one more of my own, which I think is a misunderstanding, which is that India was a society of plurality, love, and tolerance for centuries. There is too much evidence that it was not. That people were killing each other happily. Hindus were killing Jains. Everybody was killing Buddhists. I mean, Buddhists didn't, go on a tourism trip to Europe. It left India because there was no way for it to continue. Jains even worse, and that too in the south. Saivas and Vaishnavas, the list goes on. Hindus and Muslims is a late arrival in that scene of. So my great teacher, guru, my own guru, who was a great scholar of India, Professor Bernard Cohn, C-O-H-N, not H-E-N, H-N, famously made a joke saying India is a back-to-back society, not face-to-face. People are traveling in the train, they're all got their backs to each other when they're eating. So back-to-back society, which is a very good way of catching it as a joke, is not about tolerance. So you're not tolerating the person who's behind you. You're trying to keep their gaze away from your food. You're trying to, it's a cellular society. So even when you're not killing other people, you are trying to keep your bubble. intact. And if a bubble is a lower caste bubble, if you're at the bottom, that bubble is not great, but it's still your bubble. It's still something you can hold on to, etc. And of course, if you're very rich and powerful, there's plenty to hold on to, a lot of motivation. But whole idea is more or less a cellular idea. It is not about Charles Taylor, politics of recognition, you also deserve this. No. So you look at Manu and Dharma Shastra, for me, I always say to my students, is like a telephone book or directory of rules. There's nothing general. If you're a Brahmin and if it's midnight and if your wife is having a period, you are allowed to kill a Dalit. But if she is not, you're not. So rules are like this. So this is not about tolerance. So I think it's a mistaken idea. Of course, there are exceptions. Bhakti movements, the Sikh traditions, remarkable, but they are not the main story. The main story in India is people are pushed apart in our cosmology, kept separate. Contact is not encouraged. And then when contact happens between religions, ethnicities, castes, and so on, especially over scarce resources, violence is often there. And that's just the historical record. So that part I would differ with you. But today's condition, I agree with you. So I think the journey from A to B, we would have to have further discussion.
Okay.
Can I have a question, sir? Can I have a question?
Just a moment. I'm a mere chair, and the times are all set up. Now, may I ask you, most of the organizers, can we continue with the questions, or let us stop? It is 7:10.
Sir, this is Anthony.
Yes.
It depends mainly on Professor Appadurai. I think
Professor Palakal,
yes.
I regret to say that I have some small domestic obligations because it is evening time in Berlin.
I know.
And
we
Berlin anthropologists have certain evening rituals that we have to perform. We're a little bit beyond the time. So if we were all physically together under your roof, I would happily stay on. But since we are in this strange Zoom universe, I have to go with our earlier plan that a few minutes ago I would have stepped out, but I didn't want to interrupt anybody. But I think it's better for me and let all of you. I'm very sorry also that by leaving I'll be both perhaps reducing the number of questions, but also missing this second session.
Yes.
But I hope there will be a recording or some form of record of it, because I would love to see it here. So I will, with Professor Woman's permission, ask for you to wind up at least my part.
So your part is over, and means session is over. And of course, you will be thanked by somebody. That does not matter. Even if you are not here, you will be thanked.
See, thanking Professor Oman, thanking people like me is a thankless task. So
now, Anthony, you decide after hearing Professor Appadurai what you should do.
Yes, I think, Professor Arjun has said that he has to leave, and our agreement was till 7 o'clock that he would be available.
Yes,
and it's 7 past. And so I think we should allow him to, leave.
Yes.
So therefore, there are a number of questions, maybe, in the chat box too, but we shall take them all up maybe at a later point, if everything happens. So, Professor Uman, please let's conclude, this part of the session.
Yes, I think I was having an idea we must conclude, but I don't want to give any concluding remarks. You should be thanking Professor Arjun Appadurai profusely. I already have indicated that he has done a fantastic job, not only for giving lecture, but also answering them questions. So who is going to thank him?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Shidal, please announce, the person who proposes vote of thanks.
Yes. Thank you, sir. Well begun is almost half done, says an old English saying. This has been a significant milestone event for many of such to come in the future. Thank you, Professor Umen and Professor Appadure, for giving us an enriching evening and well-deserving gesture for everything Professor Kattakayam has been. Before we go on to the next session of the evening, may I invite Dr. Hiranya Kalesh in extending our words of thanks to the august audience.
Thank you, Dr. Sheetal. Respected Professor T.K. Uman, Professor Arjun Appadure, and Sri Antony Raju, Honorable Minister, Government of Kerala, and other senior academicians and colleagues of Professor Jacob John Kattakayam, and family members of our beloved Professor Jacob John Kattakayam, and my dear friends. Though this is, as Isabel said, I hope that all our colleagues have enjoyed the speech of Professor Arjun Appadure. Indeed, it was a very nice speech, and he taken us to a new realm of knowledge. So first of all, our thanks to Professor T.K. Uman sir. And in his presidential address, Professor Uman sir has in the earlier stages of his speech, he enriched us with knowledge on the background of Kattakayam family and some idea about how Syrian Christianity and all those things. He enriched us with such kind of information at the beginning of his speech. And the later part, he discussed about the curiosity that Professor Jacob John Kattakayam has shown and towards the academic field, especially in the academic administration side, how he excelled. That part Professor Uman has actually highlighted. And he highlighted the contributions made by Jacob John Kattakayam towards the evolution of Kerala sociological society and his contribution towards Indian sociological society. And sir, so we are all thankful, especially on behalf of Institute of Social Science Research, Social Research and Action, ISRA, and Jacob John Kattakayam Student Collectivity, and my personal behalf also, I convey my sincere thanks to Professor T.K. Uman. And thanks, sir. Thank you once again. And now our sincere thanks goes to our Honorable Minister, Sri Antony Raju. Honorable Minister remembered Professor Jacob John Kattakayam as a best friend. Jacob John Kattakayam as a best friend, and he threw light on Professor, how he was his dynamism, and how he shown interest in the various academic activities in the Kerala, and as a politician, how he interacted with the opportunity he got to interact with Kattakayam, and so he especially remembered Kattakayam's affiliation with the tribal community in Idukki district as a student, as a researcher and an academician, how he has shown affiliation towards the tribal community in the Idukki district of Kerala. So that was one of his highlights in the speech of Honorable Minister. Honorable Minister, actually, if you emphasize the role played by Jacob John Kattakayam in the pioneering studies of elderly in India. As a student of Jacob John Kattakayam, he was my professor in Department of Sociology, University of Kerala. So 1997, when for the first time gerontology was introduced as a subject, elective subject in Department of Sociology. So he brought a lot of books from USA when he went there as a guest faculty. So he brought a lot of books to us. So we all also remember that he was one of the pioneering persons in the studies of elderly in Kerala. So minister also reiterated that perspective about Kattakayam. And so on behalf of ISRA and all other academic community present here, we are conveying our sincere thanks to Honorable Minister for sparing valuable time with us. And so now let us come to the highlight of our program, the speech of Professor Arjun Appadure. And so he started his lecture with elaborating the development of culture. And Professor Appadure opined that Kerala is the right place for a discussion on the culture of development and development of culture. And he raised a relevant question in the middle part of his speech, why a dialogue between the disciplines is not happening. So he emphasized that a dialogue between the disciplines is an important aspect of learning the culture of development and development of culture. He quoted the example of how economics preview or economic perspective of development, how the sociological and other behavioral science, how they look into the development. So, so the one of the important concept which actually got inspired my thinking is that the concept of capacity, the concept of capacity to aspire. He said that and he raised a question. I just said that's a relevant question to as a teachers. It is relevant. Most of us are teachers, so it is very relevant to that. Relevant to us. He raised that question. Are we helping people to achieve their aspirations? As a teacher, it is very important question. Many of us are tomorrow. Some of us are research scholars are also here along with us. So they also should think once tomorrow what they will, how they will going to help the people to achieve their aspiration. That question was raised by Professor Appadure, and he, when talking about poverty and inequality, he said that poverty is not an abstract number. So it goes beyond that, beyond the abstract number, and and said that it is so, and he discussed about minority, majoritarianism, minority issues with national and yes, sir, I am concluding.
Yes, because
so
yes.
Okay. So, sir has discussed minority, majoritarian perspectives on culture and also national and international examples he brought in. So, such a way he enriched our evening with a thoughtful speech. So, on behalf of ISRA as well as the academic community present here, I am conveying my sincere thanks to Professor Arjun Appadure. Thank you, sir. Once again, we are conveying our heartfelt thanks to you. So then from the J.J.K student collective and ISRA, we convey our sincere thanks to the family of our beloved Professor Jacob John Kattakayam, because they shown a confidence in us and guided us towards this endeavor. So we convey our sincere thanks to our family of our beloved professor. And last but not least, we are also thankful to Loyola College management for allowing us to use their Zoom platform. And our special thanks to Mr. Andrew Michael, Assistant Professor, Loyola College, for the technical support. And we are not forgetting the valuable support provided by Mr. Vasudeva Bhattardi for the beautiful brochure and flyer. So with this, I'm once again conveying our sincere and heartfelt thanks to all the senior faculty members and all the research scholars and the teachers, colleagues and friends, those who came and attended this first memorial lecture of Professor Jacob John Kattakayam. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Kalesh. The second session of this evening is meant to be a sharing of memories, recollection of memories of Professor Kattakayam by his colleagues, friends, family, and students.